You are listening to the Love Unplugged podcast, episode 33. Today we are chatting with founder of Salt and Spirit Wellness, Roberta Vamaro, on her journey to recovery following a burnout. We talk about her recommended steps for recovery, but we also do a deep dive into meditation, yoga versus Pilates, and what Kundalini is and how you can benefit from them all. I learned so much from our chat and hope you do as well. So grab yourself a cup of organic tea, get comfy, and let's get to it. You are listening to Love Unplugged, a podcast focused on love in all its forms. I'm your host, Jessica Frigon, hopeful romantic and founder of Project Love. I found that too often love is set aside or taken for granted, and we tend to forget how to care for ourselves and our important relationships in the day-to-day chaos. So let's slow down, tune in, and begin our journey of rediscovering love. From honest heart-to-heart conversations with real couples and knowledgeable guests to deep dive reviews of new products and services that will help you feel beautiful inside and out. If you're looking for relatable advice or wanting to be inspired by real-life love stories, you've come to the right place. Without further ado, let's get to it. Hello friends, today I am joined by Roberta Vamaro, the founder of Salt and Spirit Wellness, a studio that combines the power of movement and strength building practices with the mind balancing aspects of meditation and yoga. We are going to learn about her pivotal moment that changed the course of her life and the benefits of meditation and movement, what Kundalini is, and what her studio offers. So welcome, Roberta. I'm so honored to have you as my guest, and I'm so excited to learn all about your story and the classes you offer through Salt and Spirit Wellness. But before we start, for those that don't know you yet, I would love for you to share a little bit about who you are.
Great. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Roberta or Roberta, depending on where you are.
I love that. It sounds so beautiful.
It's very, very French in a way. And I'm originally from Brazil. I was born in Brazil from an Italian family. In my past life, in this lifetime, I used to be a lawyer and then becoming a yoga teacher about 10, 15 years ago. And I've been living in Vancouver for the past 10 years. I guess, the culmination of all this work that I have been doing with yoga, meditation, and mindfulness is that I opened the studio, Salt and Spirit Wellness, about a year ago in Kids. I'm very excited about it, and that's about it. That's what I can think about. Yeah.
So let's start with that pivotal moment that changed the course of your life. So let's talk about kind of what led to you being in that hospital.
It was a combination in between the career that I was in, like working at one of the biggest law firms in the world, very, very long hours. This was about 15 years ago. The environment was not the greatest, particularly for women. Like, this is way before Me Too movement, all that sort of thing. So the environment was actually quite heavy, and also lifestyle, because I don't want to blame it just in the career. I tell this to my clients all the time. You could be working at a corporate setting and still be happy and still have a balanced life. But for me, the problem was, I would finish work at 10 o'clock and then I would go to the gym for about 2 hours. For God knows what reason. I mean, I know the reason. It was the beach body, the whole thing. I just wanted to look good. And then I'm running 15 kilometers after a very long hour. So my body was exhausted. I was just pushing. And I was in my 20s and I thought, it's fine. Very much tired and fatigued, the whole adrenal fatigue type thing situation. No wonder that I had a kidney infection, and that's what led me to the hospital. It was pretty serious. And when that happened, you're just there and you face a different reality, which is well, maybe I'm not going to be here, right? You don't know what's going to happen. So for 2 weeks, I was on heavy duty antibiotics, and because I was forced to rest, to stop, I just started to contemplate everything else that was happening in my life. Am I doing this because of me? Do I want to do this? Or am I doing this because society, family, parents, whatever told me that this is the way to do it? And that totally changed, my life, because when I finally felt better and I could go back to work, I remember coming into the office and my boss was like, are you okay? What happened? And I'm telling him the details. Of course he knew because we were in touch, but I was telling the details, and I was very honest with him, and I said, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And he was a bit shocked, because he was like, well, you're just 2 weeks, like, what happened in 2 weeks, right? What happened? I'm like, well, I'm just wondering about it. And the second thing that happened was that from my perception of what I was doing with my life came also a perception of how I was living my life, not just like in a career base, but also the lifestyle in general. What am I doing? Why am I going to the gym for 2 hours a day? Why am I doing this? And that sort of led me into more of a mindfulness practice, which is the Kundalini yoga and the meditation, because it changed also my relationship to my body. So that needed to heal in order for me to heal everything else, right?
Yeah.
So from that on, I just like, no, I'm not going to do this. And from just practicing like many, many hours a day, I felt so excited and so connected to it that I was like, I want to do this. I want to teach this. I want to be, doing this for like a full-time thing. And it happened that way, very organically. Just started teaching my friends. Once I quit the law firm, a bunch of lawyers called me like, I'm also stressed. I'm also having a burnout. And I'm like, okay, come on over. Let's meditate. And that's how it organically started.
That's crazy, because one of the things that connected me to your story was the law aspect. So when I was in school, I was going for legal secretary and then paralegal. Yeah. And I had someone that was helping me find jobs in law firms and whatnot. And she sat me down and she gave me a rundown of what it's like in the law industry. And yeah. I still to this day remember that conversation, because she was really just honest about this is exactly what you're getting into. You need to be prepared that this is the type of environment that you're going to be dealing with. Yeah. These are the type of people that you're going to be dealing with, and you're going to be working extremely long hours. Mm-hmm. And from that moment, I was like, not for me.
Yeah. Definitely. So, I know it's interesting because it's true everywhere. It's true, I worked in Brazil, I worked in New York as well before moving to Canada. And it's true everywhere. Now, the thing about it is that it wasn't so much, because I want to kind of like break the paradigm as well. It wasn't so much the amount of work and the number of hours there, because I'm doing pretty much the same here. Owning my studio, if you're going to become an entrepreneur, you're going to be putting in the hours. Exactly. But you love what you do, and there's a connection to it, and you can do the things in a certain way, which are very fulfilling and make sense to you. Whereas when you're working for somebody, it's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. So, but what I usually tell people is that it's obviously if it's a toxic environment, and I try to stay away from that word, but sometimes it is, it's just, and it was the case 15 years ago. I'm talking about like chauvinistic behaviors and things like that would not be okay nowadays. They were still happening. And in that case, I agree, like maybe it's not the place to be, and working for that number of hours might not be the best thing for you. So you have to decide for yourself.
Exactly.
Some people are okay with it. Right, and
some people thrive in those environments. Oh yeah, or working the long hours, and that's fine.
Yeah. My husband, he loves it. Like just stays out. Yeah, it's fine. It's totally fine with it. But for me, it was just too much. The whole thing. Yeah, I agree.
So exactly, how do you recover from burnout? What were the steps that you took specifically, and what are some steps that other people can take that are going through a burnout themselves?
So I would say probably eating well is the number one. It was the number one for me, because for me it was not just the work, it was also the lifestyle, and sometimes it's attached to it, because you don't have time to eat, and I didn't have time to eat. I remember eating like whatever, some kind of salad, just looking at my computer as I'm doing the work, and half through the thing. Yeah, it was just awful. So eat according to your constitution, which is one thing that I tell people all the time. It's what I practice as Salt and Spirit. For me, it's Ayurveda, which is a traditional Indian medicine, and I think it's a big game changer. It's just eating according to your constitution, and everybody's so different. That's why I tell people I stay away from the diets and the fads and the this and that, because everybody's different. Mm-hmm. So figure out what is it that you need, that your body needs. So whatever you're putting in, like, has to be quality in terms of the food and all that kind of stuff that we know from ages ago. Mm-hmm. The second thing is making time to do something that you love, something that makes your heart sing, something that makes you feel happy. And people talk a lot about meditation, yoga, self-improvement, but sometimes it's actually taking a dance class. Sometimes it's going out to dinner with your friends. Sometimes it's just watching Netflix, like something that you connect with and makes you happy. And it doesn't have to be good for you, put it this way, right? I mean, as long as it's not like, getting drunk and partying every day. I mean, whatever you want to do, but maybe not every day, right?
Something good for your soul.
Yeah, good for your soul. Yeah. And the third thing I think, for the burnout is there is actually a condition now that you can be diagnosed with a burnout. Yeah, a friend of mine, lawyer, has been recently, but that's a pretty intense, sort of like condition. She was telling me I was sleeping for 15 hours a day because I just couldn't get out of bed. I just couldn't do the things. Her hormones were so depleted that she couldn't really get the energy to let's go open the door and get out of the house, right? So in that case, of course, rest is going to be the number one thing. And of course, I'm going to say meditation is definitely, it has been proved to work on your brain, on your body, the glandular system, energetically. The benefits are sort of countless in a way.
I love that you say to find something that brings you joy, because that's exactly when I went through my burnout a few years ago. I was doing everything for everybody else, and I needed to do something for me, and I decided to start the blog and the podcast, start the blog, which now I have a podcast. But it was something for me, and it's something that made me happy, and it kind of changed my vibration. It kind of,
right?
It's a whole shift that kind of happens internally.
So much so, yeah.
It's very healing.
It's super healing, and you become so magnetic and so radiant from that one little practice that you're doing. And I have this friend that she was telling me that she's in New York City, and she was telling me she's a Kundalini teacher as well. And there are a lot of guidelines when you teach yoga, when you teach meditation. There's a lot of expectations, and she's like, Roberta, I'm a little bit tired of that. And she comes from a Russian background, like European background, and she's like, my whole life I see people like the ladies wearing makeup, and like my aunties and my mom like wearing high heels and just going out and going to a nice restaurant. And that's what fills my heart. That's what I love to do. But she had a little bit of that judgment coming from I'm a yoga teacher, I'm going to wear lipstick.
You can't do that.
Right?
It doesn't fall in line.
It doesn't fall. It's like my brand and she's like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And she created like this beautiful offering, which is called the Art of Radiant Woman. For anybody that wants to check it out, it's so amazing. The Art of Radiant Woman. It's amazing because she has a lot of the Kundalini teachings, including the Radiance teachings, which we can talk about later because they're very interesting. But also self-improvement, and also, can you find time for yourself? Can you find time to do something that you find fun? Even if it is putting on lipstick and going to a nice restaurant. It's okay. You're fine, right?
Love that. So when you changed careers, when you made that decision that this was no longer the industry and the career that you were going to do, how did you feel about that decision? Because you had been studying and working towards that goal for so long, and now it's done.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting that everybody asks me this question, and I have to be honest, it felt right. I had no fear. I was pretty bold about it, actually, which is very interesting. I just knew it was the right thing to do, because this is what I tell clients as well. It's that if you're doing something that is not serving you, just imagine how your life would be 5 years from now doing that thing. And this is, I had time to do that, mind you. I had the 2 weeks not doing anything, just imagining my life. How would that look like? As opposed to taking this other path. Which one would energize you the most? That's the main question you should ask yourself. Forget what friends tell you, what your parents tell you, or whatever the world tells you. Which one is going to make you feel like, I'm so excited? It's just energy, right? Mm-hmm. And it was definitely not continuing at the law firm. It was the second one. So by the time I made that decision, that this other path, this other reality stopped existing. I didn't dwell on it. I didn't think like, oh my God, I shouldn't have done this or this and that. I just went right into the,
That's when you know it's
yes,
time.
When you know it's time. Now, mind you, everybody's very different. I get that, because I hear a lot of times like people tell me, well, I have kids, or, I have like dependents, and it's a little bit different that way. I think you have to plan if you're going to make a big change. I knew that if I quit the law firm, I knew that I had already some money saved, that I could do something different with my life. So I had, in a sense, planned very well, which I think is important.
Good.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to create this business specifically?
Salt and Spirit? Yeah. So I moved to Vancouver about 10 years ago. It's a kind of a cute story. I was in New York. My husband is Canadian, and we met. Oh. Yeah, we met in New York City, and we decided to get married. We fell madly in love, like immediately kind of thing. And then he's like, okay, where are we going to live? And we had options because I'm from Italian family. We have friends and family in France. We had friends and family in Brazil. And he has family in Calgary. So we had lots of options. And London as well. So we could choose, different places. And I had been in Vancouver once in 1998, just like with my father, just visiting as a kid. And I loved it. I just really liked it. And I remember as a kid, I was looking at the buildings and, I loved the whole by the water kind of the way that the buildings reflect the water kind of thing. I remember this as a kid. I was like, I want to live there one day. I'm going to live there one day. This was in 1998. And, when we got married, I'm like, okay, I guess Vancouver it is, and we just came here 10 years ago. And I have been teaching yoga and meditation in Vancouver pretty much full time. Like I did a little bit of legal work here and there, but I was just really focusing on the yoga meditation side, teaching all over town, many different studios, community centers. And what I've noticed was that the clients that I would get and also my relationship to yoga and meditation was such that I wanted to create a space that could offer something a little bit deeper, not just the physical aspect of yoga, which there's nothing wrong with it. Like I still do, like Ashtanga sequences, the flow, but I wanted to offer something a little bit deeper. So when people come to the class, the questions like, who am I? Where am I going? And very pragmatic questions too, like am I on the right career? Should I pursue this relationship? Like that's the game, but it's going a little bit deeper through your practice. And I try to find places like that for me to teach at and work, and I just really couldn't find. And I felt, I think there is a space, there is an opening for that to happen. This was about 3 years ago, and now I see that there are some studios doing the same thing and just opening up to the wellness side. Because when I opened the studio about a year ago, people would come in and ask me, "Is this a doctor's office?" And you're here. You know that it doesn't look like a doctor's office. There's a huge gong in the room. It's like, it's
I'd be going to the doctors a lot more frequently if it looked like this.
I know, right? It's just like, no, this is not a doc, because the word wellness was not really understood. No. They did. Now it is. Very interesting how within less than a year, people know what it is, right? So that was the main goal. I wanted to make sure that it was a space that people felt safe and grounded, and you can go deeper. You can just meditate. You can do practices, and not just Kundalini. We have also breath work, the Western approach, and the Hatha Yoga approach. We also have mindfulness meditation practices. We also have the traditional Hatha Yoga practice and the flow yoga practice. But the bottom line, the overarching principle is, do you want to go deeper? Can you go deeper?
Awesome. I love that. We're going to get into the different types of practices that you offer, because I'm curious as to what Kundalini is.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
So what was your experience like starting the business? What are some learnings that you had in the beginning stages?
Yeah, so for me, it was actually very much, it's self-psychology. I tell this to people all the time. If you're going to be a business owner or starting something even like online and stuff like that, it's really understanding how your sort of like your working behavior and your psychology, how they connect. Because some people are very like, oh, I need to have like very, very specific timelines, and I'm going to do from 9 to 5. This is what I'm going to do. And they have all the bullet points and they follow that through. I'm not like that. You're left here. You're like that?
I'm very much like that, but yeah. I'm surprised you're not.
No, I'm not. I'm so not.
You're from the law industry.
I
know. It's very like black and white.
Isn't it interesting? But yeah, it's funny enough because my legal background was in international tax law, and it's a super niche kind of thing, and also it was very much research related. So I have a scientific mind, and I joke around because I say to people I'm like the skeptical mystic, because I do have a little bit of that. I want to see the proof. And the scientific mind doesn't necessarily work in the 9 to 5 way, like you might feel very creative and very, I just have this epiphany, I just have this clarity right now, and I'm going to do it. Sometimes you're trying to do something and it doesn't happen during that 9 to 5 time. So I know. My day is a little bit like, I do a lot of stuff at 4 o'clock in the morning because I wake up early, I know. I wake up early for meditation, and then a lot of times in meditation, I just get an insight, and I might make my notes on that day. So I made it work for my psychology. Like right before you came, I was just stretching here in the room and then sending my emails in between my yoga poses, because that's how it works for me.
Wow.
Right? So you have to find out what works for you, and from then you can craft sort of like your journey and your day. Now the challenge when I was opening the business, of course, is that the sometimes that's not really the way that is expected outside. So you have timelines, you know, like you're submitting a business plan to investors. It has to be done in a certain way, in a certain format, which I can do. I'm okay with it. It's just the timing that needed to be a little bit adjusted so that I had my creative juices, you know, flowing freely. Yeah.
Gotcha. So knowing everything you know now, that your business is established and is thriving now, is there anything that you would do differently if you were to start over again?
I would say the main thing would be, it's a brick and mortar business, right? It's a brick and mortar business in 2019. So there are the challenges related to, I mean, I'm not going to go there because I don't like to go into the victim mentality or the complaining mode, but everybody knows that the brick and mortar industry is a challenging industry to break into. And I didn't come from a background with, it wasn't like my family that owned businesses before, and they were just like, oh yeah, Roberta, you know, here it is. I take this property, you know, it wasn't like that. I just went to the bank, submitted a business plan myself, wrote it down, and just like, here it is, you know, give me feedback. What can I do? And from then finding sponsors. So I would say that the main thing would be to have a little bit more of a pool of different investors, because I started very, very undercapitalized, very much so. Like the business, the business consultant that she came by just to have a look the other day, and she's like looking around. My God. She's like, what you have done, it's a miracle. She's like, you know, her eyes are like, how could you do this with what you had? You know, and I'm talking about like my husband and I painting the walls at the studio, installing the back flooring. Like we really kind of, in a way it was great because he made us work and know a lot, like research and do a lot ourselves. But I think that would be the main difference. Just get a little bit more like a pool of different investors.
Gotcha.
To make it easier. Yeah.
Smart. Do you take any classes yourself to further your knowledge or your practice so that you're able to teach more to your students?
All the time. Yeah. I go, I mean, my teachers are in New York and California, which the time, I mean, the distance is not the greatest, but I do go to New York quite often, and I try to go to California at least twice a year. So I do the retreats. I can't really do like classes every week because of course I'm not there, but I do the retreats and sort of the immersions. And there's something called the White Tantra in Kundalini. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, when we say Tantra, people think like Tantra.
Dirty?
Yeah. Talk dirty. No, it's that's the red Tantra. So
okay.
The White Tantra is different. Yeah, it's meditation. And they're having one actually on the 23rd here in Vancouver, Saturday the 23rd. So it's an 8-hour meditation practice. I mean, there are breaks, but just so you know, you're for 8 hours meditating, which I highly recommend. And so I try to do something like that every year, and the immersion, so that I stay, you know, it's good to be the student as well. You have that mind, the mindset, and also receiving, because the teacher is always giving. So this way you get to receive a little bit.
More of a balanced energy.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Are there certain classes that you prefer? So you're doing the 8-hour meditation one, but do you prefer like Kundalini over like yoga classes, or like what do you like to take classes in?
I take classes of everything. I mean, if I'm just doing for fun, I love to take dance classes. I might just like take like a hip hop class. I just love it. Like I think it's fun.
Wow,
I love it.
Very different.
I know, but I love it so much. I love hip hop. People don't know this about me, but I do love hip hop. I mean, of course, I lived in New York, right?
That's true.
Yeah. So I do the hip hop classes. I try to do a little bit of sort of like a breath work. I might come to Lorena's class, which is on Saturdays in the morning, and I come to the breath work class and just have that energizing kind of like, you know, just a little glimpse of like prana and just taking in the energy, which is really good. But my preferred yoga practice is Kundalini. Yeah. It's really what makes me happy. So I do more Kundalini classes when I can.
Okay, we're going to get into that. But let's start with meditation. So for those that haven't started a meditation practice and aren't quite really sure what it is, or like how you even go about doing it and what's the best way to meditate, can you kind of walk us through that practice?
Yeah, so I like this definition of meditation, which is, I mean, you take a bath for your body, right? You take a shower, you take a bath. Like meditation is a bath for your mind. So what it does is to actually cleanse the thoughts that no longer serve you. And this is self-sabotaging behaviors. This is sort of like the negative self-talk, fearful thoughts. It's cleansing these thoughts that are not you. And ultimately making you recognize what you truly are, right? So when you, first we do a little bit of unblocking and cleansing from the meditation practices. And then once you recognize, okay, these thoughts are not me, so then who am I? Then you get into sort of like the deeper meditative state. Because meditation, when people talk about meditation, they're usually talking about the technique. Like, oh yeah, I'm focusing on the breath. I'm focusing on a thought, or nothing, or thinking of nothing, right? Or a candle. Like they're usually referring to the technique, but the actual meditation state happens in between the focused mind and the sort of a sleep kind of mind. In between, there is a state that we call turiya in Sanskrit, which is when you have an expanded awareness and consciousness, and you recognize and you can see, oh wow, I am more than what I think I am. And some people call this like a state of totality, a state of higher consciousness, enlightenment, whatever you want to call. It just creates that really, you don't even know where you are. It expands time and space. It breaks a little bit time and space. So that's the meditation. Like when you read about it in ancient texts, that's what they're talking about. That the technique is trying to get you to that state. Gotcha. So what you do in terms of like which meditation is the best one, it really doesn't matter. It's whatever works for you to get to that state. So it could be meditating on your breath. It could be meditating on a movement. It could be meditating on a task, which a lot of the Zen Buddhism meditation is like you're washing the dishes and you're very mindful of what you're doing. That's a meditative state. And you could, within that moment, reach this state of expansion, which is the meditative state. Yeah.
How long does it take for you to get to that meditative state?
You know what? Time is relative and time doesn't really exist. That's my understanding anyways. My belief. It doesn't really, it depends on the person. It really depends on the person. It really depends on the technique. I mean, there are techniques that are supposedly faster, and Kundalini is one of them, as opposed to Hatha Yoga, for example. So what the scriptures, the text says that Hatha Yoga, and when I say Hatha Yoga, it's not just a slow yoga, it's any yoga for the body, right? Flow, vinyasa, it's also included in that. For that one, it takes 22 years, what they say, to perfect it and to get into this sort of like... I know, it takes a long time. Okay. And then Kundalini, you can take like one class. You know, it could take like 3 minutes. It depends on the person, really. But again, it's what is the emphasis of the technique? What is the technique trying to create?
Okay. So what's the difference between yoga and Pilates? So that I've always wondered. Yeah. I like hot yoga. Yeah. Because I feel like I can get into the movement a lot deeper. Yeah. But I love Pilates.
I love Pilates too, and I teach Pilates too. Yeah, I love it so much.
So
yeah, I'll tell you. You're going to be very interested in knowing that Joseph Pilates, Joseph Pilates created Pilates, right? That's the name of the guy that created Pilates. That's why it's called that. This guy actually studied yoga, including Kundalini yoga and a lot of deeper breathwork practices. That's why there's a lot of emphasis in a sort of like classical Pilates class, authentic Pilates class on the breath. Right? Inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth during the whole practice. And when he created the practice, he said, I want this to be also a revolution for the mind. So if you ever read any of the books that Joseph Pilates himself wrote, he talks a lot about vitality. He talks a lot about radiance, energy. So it's a very energizing practice. And I get this question all the time. You're a meditation studio, wellness studio. Why do you offer Pilates? Isn't Pilates fitness? And I'm like, well, it can be very athletic. But when it was conceived, originally it was for health and vitality and this energy, right? And he studied Qigong as well, which is another energy practice, yeah. So I would say the difference is just the approach. Like Pilates was this technique that was developed by this guy who studied yoga and different modalities. Whereas yoga is yoga that I talk about is the authentic yoga, not like mixing, different things. Was a technique that was pretty much, I wouldn't say even created, it was downloaded by the sages in higher meditative states. When they were very much deep into a meditative state, they would just spontaneously get into a yoga posture, upside down, for example. And then from looking at that, and it's the same thing with mantras, when looking at that, the sages were like, well, this guy just went upside down. He was meditating and he went upside down. I wonder if I go upside down, if I'm going to go into the same state. And that's how the yoga postures came up. So, and they were very secret. They were not really taught openly. You would have to go to a cave and, I don't know, like just prove yourself to the teacher, climb a mountain, wash his feet, all these sorts of things in order to get the yoga postures, right? And a lot of the yoga practice that we do here in the West came from this lineage of the Krishnamacharya lineage. And he was the guy that taught Iyengar, Pattabhi Jois, which is the Ashtanga guy, and some of other teachers of the Hatha Yoga tradition. We practice a lot of that, but there are different traditions that come from usually with the meditative path, and they also have a little bit of yoga related to that. But people don't, we go to the studio and we just sweat and we feel great, but we don't realize that these techniques are actually all made and all done to awaken energy. That was the point.
So which one is best for what?
Oh, okay. So in terms of the results.
Yeah, for someone that's trying to figure out which one that they should actually try themselves.
Yeah.
What should they expect from either one?
So the Pilates, I would say you get a little bit more, just the physiology and physically, okay? So you get a little bit more of I call the glue, like you're bringing a little bit more into the core, you're bringing yourself a little bit more into a strength kind of a pattern, like a strengthening the body quite a bit, especially the core. Whereas yoga does a little bit more the stretching, sort of opening, that's why you say like when you go to do hot yoga, it's hot in the room, you can go a little bit deeper into the stretch. So your body can get into places and positions that couldn't get before. The Pilates is a little bit more the strengthening. I would say I do both because I think we need both. We need strength and we need flexibility, right? So
gotcha. When it comes to all of this meditation, yoga, Kundalini, is there any kind of religious aspects to it? Like people who may not be religious might be kind of fearful sometimes, wondering, what are all these mantras and like all these things that are happening? What is it behind that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I love this question. The mantras themselves is a little bit similar to the yoga postures. The mantras themselves, they were not religious because this was whatever the religion now uses the mantra, right? What happened was the religion came and appropriated the mantras, but the mantras were created before that. So mantras are sound, they're basically, we call permutation combination of sounds. And the way that the sages were envisioning and hearing these sounds is that they would get into a meditative state and they would see a symbol. And I don't know if you have seen some of the Sanskrit, there is a little symbol, Om, everybody knows Om, right?
Yeah.
So they would see the symbol and they would hear a sound that would be accompanied by the symbol. And they would just write it down and tell others, the language was downloaded as opposed to English, Portuguese, and so forth, which was created, developed over years. What happened with time, the idea was if I repeat these sounds that the guy had in this vision, I could get into the same meditative state that he was. And they carry energy, a lot of energy. So there is a different understanding. I'll tell you why I think sometimes people get a little bit scared of it. It's not scared of the religious aspect. It's scared of energy because it's going to change you. It's definitely going to change you. Now, what happened, of course, over the years is that different traditions, different paths, different, spiritual sort of like paths started to appropriate the mantras and say, we use these mantras, and created their own way of doing. And then when we see that, especially us Westerners, we see that, we go, oh no, that belongs to this tradition or that tradition, but in reality it doesn't. It's the traditions, right? And what they do is they unlock certain areas of your brain, very similar to yoga postures, right? When you're doing headstand and you're going to feel the blood flow to the head, you're going to feel the energy running a certain way. When you're repeating the mantras, the tongue is hitting the roof of the mouth in a certain way, and that's yoga for the tongue, literally. And even hearing these sounds, but also the chanting of it, it will awaken certain energies and certain patterns of the brain that will give you a higher state of consciousness. And sometimes people get scared of that. They get scared of the gong too, which is a similar vibe, you know? Yeah, quite a bit.
I'd be scared to get hit by it, but
the sound is like, oh my God. I just had 2 people coming in yesterday, and they were looking at the space just like as a curiosity. Oh, can you play for me? Yes. And then I started playing. They were like, like, you know, really like, wow, this is really powerful. And I'm like, yeah, you know, it can change you. So I think a lot of it, it's a little bit of the resistance is not so much to what you think is the religion, is the appropriation or whatever, but it's actually the energy that you're blocking from
gotcha.
coming.
All right, so I want to talk about the Kundalini. What is this?
What is it? So I heard, just before I came here, it was interesting. I love, like, synchronicity happens all the time. Like, if you're doing something, meditating, some kind of spirituality, you know, you're gonna live around synchronicity. It just happens. But right before I came here, I was just turned my phone, and there was this talk by a friend of mine talking about Kundalini, and she was using an image that I had never heard, but I love it. It's the image of the lens and the lever. So the lens is like, you see the world through a particular lens. I mean, literally, your eyes are lenses, right? And when you're looking at things from your perspective, you see from a very limited side because it's only yours, right? Mm-hmm. So if I put a piece of cake here and both of us try, I know, it would be great.
Yes, I'd be happy.
You'll be happy, but we could have different opinions about the cake. Maybe you don't like chocolate. I don't know if there are people in this world that don't like chocolate, but you know what I mean? Like, we try the cake and we go like, I like it, I don't like it. So it's a very different perspective. Now, what Kundalini and some of these technologies, the yoga technologies, do is that they act as a lever, or lever, some people call. From underneath, they pull you up, like your energy literally lifting you up, to look at things from a different perspective, from a different angle, with a different set of lenses. So when you see the world, it has a different perspective. And not just Kundalini, I mean, yoga, Hatha Yoga does that as well, right? When you're having a problem, let's say I have a problem and I'm here, there is a certain frequency for the problem. If I'm upside down doing my headstand, the problem has a different frequency. The problem has a different energy. And this can be understood from a scientific point of view, which is like, well, you know, you're doing these practices and you're bringing more blood flow to the brain. You're making the glandular system work better. You're feeling less grumpy. You're feeling more energized. You just, like, your heart rate is a little bit faster. So then you go, I'm ready to take the day. That problem doesn't even exist anymore, right? So you just feel better about it. That's my definition of Kundalini, but you have to experience it, right? We did the meditation right before, right?
Was that Kundalini?
That was Kundalini.
Oh,
yeah.
So there's no, like, poses like yoga.
Kundalini is, it's a science. I mean, from the pragmatic perspective, it's a technology, really. And you have, within that technology, there are 8,000 different meditations and movements and kriyas. Kriyas are the set of postures. So if you come to a class, you're always going to get the tuning in, which is the mantra. You're going to get a little bit of the warm-up. You're going to get the kriya, which is the sequence of poses. Like, you go to hot yoga, there is a sequence of poses, right, that you do. You get that. And then in the end, you get the meditation. What we did here together was the meditation.
Gotcha.
So if let's say you only have like 10 minutes to do Kundalini, you can do just a little warm-up, like, let's say cat-cow, 3 minutes of cat-cow, and then you go straight into your meditation, 5-7 minutes of your meditation. That can be your practice. There are options for everybody.
Interesting. So you were talking about the prosperity one that Cassie and Christy do.
Yeah.
So are there different ones for different things?
Yeah, definitely. There are different, people go like, oh my God, there are 8,000 different ones that you can choose from. And they all work at they have different emphasis. I mean, they all ultimately are trying to connect you with yourself. That's the thing, right? You're trying to get rid of the whole, what people call the ego, but we don't say get rid of the ego in Kundalini. We say work with your ego. Just make it help you. Mm-hmm. That's the self-psychology that I was saying in the beginning. Like, you start to understand more about yourself, the shadow aspects and the kind of the good aspects, and how to work with them. Now, the meditations, that they usually have a cute name, or they might have like a different focus. People love the ones for prosperity, of course. They love the ones for radiance, of course. And I love the prosperity ones too. And the prosperity ones, I find them to be very active. It's sort of a little bit more of an active meditation. You might find you're doing movements with your arms. You might find that you're doing sounds, repeating some sounds, they make you a little bit more energized in a way.
So for someone that hasn't been to your studio before, what can they expect when they come here for a class? Like, what do you wear? Should you be bringing anything? Like, just prepare them for mentally for what they're about to go through.
Yeah. Oh my God, they can come whatever way they want to come. Come as you are, leave more as you are, as I often say. You know, I have people coming in sometimes with suits. They're wearing suits, but they didn't have the time to change, and they, whatever, they take the jacket and the tie and they just sit down and do the yoga, which is fine. So whatever you want to wear, usually yoga outfits are fine. Whatever, like your yoga pants and t-shirt, something comfortable, because we do yoga postures. We do, like, the warrior poses. We do downward dog poses. We do this is the Kundalini, right? Of course, the Hatha yoga class is just the typical Hatha yoga class. I would say comfortable clothing. That's all. And we have everything here. We have yoga mats, we have pillows, we have blankets. You don't have to bring anything. People love to come after work, so you don't have to bring stuff. Yeah.
Blankets?
We have blankets. The reason for the blankets, people ask, like, why do you have blankets?
It's nap time.
Nap time. We do, at the end of the day, like, let's say you're doing like a gong bath. It's funny because what happens, any kind of shavasana relaxation practice, because the heart rate slows down, the metabolism, you might find yourself feeling a little bit cooler. Same with breath work. So it's nice to have something to cover you. But the other thing is we use the blankets quite a bit for the yoga alignment classes. Yeah, the yoga alignment classes are based on the Iyengar tradition. And the blankets can be used, like we were talking in the beginning, like you could prop your buttocks if you feel like, oh, I'm sitting with my legs crossed and my back hurts. My groins are too tight. You can make the blanket into a pillow and sit on the blanket. They can be used behind your knees if you have a knee injury. So there are many different uses for that.
Gotcha. When do you use this huge, is it a gong? Gong. Yeah. So when do you use this, and what is it actually for? So what are the benefits?
So the gong it's really trying to recreate the sound of the universe, which is sort of like Om as well, right? We know that sound current, the mantra. So it's funny because, the first time I played this here was actually it was a client of mine, and he had never heard the gong, and I played for him, and he was like, I just felt like it was, I don't know, like on some spaceship, and there was some kind of fight happening. I was out in the universe, and that's exactly, not the spaceship part, but that's exactly the sound of the universe. So if you play like on YouTube, like NASA videos, it's going to sound a bit like the gong. And a lot of times people tell me that they hear different voices through the gong, because it really creates that, it has the resonance of the sound of the universe. So you might have different sound currents hitting you at a different time. And the reason why we play is because the sound, it's such a powerful technology. That's why we use mantras so much in Kundalini. It's such a powerful technology to go into that brain wave that we talked about, the meditative state. And the gong specifically breaks through the patterns and the blocks. That's why sometimes it's not super pleasant. I get people sometimes telling me like, oh my God, I loved it. And on the following day, they just go, oh, today I don't know why I didn't like it. Because depending on what's going on, what's breaking through, it might not feel super,
interesting,
easeful.
And is it just like one hit, or are you playing a song? Oh,
you play. I can play for you later, but it's just like really, it keeps going constantly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Have you been to the sound bath, like the ones with the crystal balls? Because they do also constantly, and then with the gong, we also do it like vibrating constantly.
Wow. Okay. Definitely going to have to experience this.
Yeah.
So what programs and classes do you offer here?
So we do have obviously the Kundalini classes, the meditation classes that I mentioned, the breath work, but also the yoga alignment, which is a bit more rehab. We have it's an interesting group of people that I have been working with for a long time. They're so sweet. And a lot of them have injuries, so they can really join sort of like a Hatha yoga or a flow yoga class because, they have knee injuries or back injuries. So the yoga alignment is a great opportunity to, first of all, heal the body from different problems you might be experiencing, but also to understand the alignment of the posture so that you can do it at a yoga flow or a Kundalini class or a Vinyasa class. You can do the same posture, but you understand how to adapt. So I find this a great class. A lot of teachers take that class too, because it does give you the cueing and how to correct students in a good way. That's a great class that way. And the Pilates classes, which are one of my favorites to do it. There's a friend of mine who's teaching it. I really like it. It's just so empowering and energizing. And we do a little bit more the classical style, which is a little bit closer to what Joseph Pilates wanted to teach originally, which means it's the athletic side. It's not the rehab side, because Pilates has a rehab component too, but it's more active that way. But you still get a lot of, like, people sometimes go like, wow, I feel so relaxed and toned.
That's perfect.
Perfect combination. Yeah.
Awesome. So if anybody wants to learn more about you, where can they connect with you?
So you can connect on Salt and Spirit on Instagram, at Salt and Spirit, at Salt and Spirit Wellness. And my personal Instagram, it's Roberta.Volmaro, my name, which is usually tagged with Salt and Spirit. And for my personal one, it's a great way to connect, because I do offer online courses as well, which are not coming from Salt and Spirit. So if people don't have the time to come to a studio and try, maybe you want to try Kundalini, you can do it online and see how it feels, and then, come to a class and it's nice to be in a group energy though. Mm-hmm. It's very good to do that way. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Roberta, for taking the time to share your story with us and for shedding so much light on the importance of self-care, and also explaining what all this is. So meditation, Kundalini, and whatnot. I so appreciate the time you've taken today for explaining all that.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful meeting you.
Yes, wonderful meeting you too. Thank you.
I'm Jessica, and thanks for tuning in today to Love Unplugged, the podcast. If there are any questions or topics you'd love answered on the show, head on over to www.projectloveco.com and share your request with me. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with a loved one. Your feedback means the world to me, and the community we've created is what fuels our discussions here. After all, this is all for you. Join me next time for another unplugged conversation.